Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a really vital, yet surprisingly quiet, equation that's running in the background of our global economy. At its core, the premise is devastatingly simple. Basically, every single bushel of corn being produced right now has two competing buyers. And it's this exact bidding war that's currently dictating global food security.
So, who are these two buyers? Well, on one side, we have buyer one, a mouth. This represents human beings and livestock that actually need sustenance to survive. On the other side, we have buyer two, a gas tank, representing the massive biofuel industry. And here's the stark reality of our current economic landscape. With Brent crude oil sitting at around $108 a barrel, the gas tank is currently winning this bidding war by an absolute landslide.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer scale of that victory. Take a look at the United States, which is the world's largest corn producer. A staggering 40% of its entire corn crop is completely diverted to ethanol production. 40%. That's a massive slice of the agricultural pie that isn't going to feed people and it's not going to feed livestock. It is literally being burned as fuel for cars.
Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to follow a very structured roadmap today to see exactly how an energy crisis automatically transmits into a food crisis. We'll hit the mouth versus gas tank dynamic, the biofuel boom, the dual squeeze, global crop diversion, the raw calorie arithmetic, and finally the policy dilemma. Let's get right to it.
Starting off with Section 1, Mouth versus Gas Tank, the Ultimate Bidding War.
Which brings us right into Section 2, the biofuel boom, and how it acts as the primary transmission mechanism.
Under normal economic conditions, this trade-off between food and fuel is a bit contentious, sure, but it's generally manageable. Ethanol mandates guarantee a baseline demand, and normally corn is pretty abundant. But the second oil hits $108 a barrel, the entire equation flips. At those prices, converting corn to ethanol becomes insanely profitable. The biofuel sector actually stops being just an alternative energy source, and it becomes a direct mechanical link pulling agricultural commodities straight out of the global food supply and into the energy chain. It's a chain reaction. First, you have high gasoline prices, say $4 to $5 a gallon nationally. Because ethanol is blended directly into our gas, think E10, E15, and E85, ethanol's value just spikes. Because those profit margins are so good, every single ethanol plant runs at absolute maximum capacity. And to keep those plants running, they aggressively bid up corn prices, pulling it directly away from the food supply.
Now we hit Section 3, the dual squeeze. This is where we see the perfect storm forming.
The thing is, this food versus fuel battle isn't happening in a vacuum. It's colliding head-on with a massive fertilizer shortage. We're looking at a compounding catastrophe where the food supply is squeezed from two entirely different directions at the exact same time. Mathematically, it breaks down like this. Force 1. The Hormuz closure severely reduced the global fertilizer supply. Less fertilizer means farmers simply produce less food per hectare, so total global food production immediately shrinks. Then you hit Force 2. High oil prices drastically increase biofuel demand. So, out of that already smaller pool of crops, an even larger percentage is diverted away to be burned as fuel. The supply is literally contracting from both ends at once. Just listen to this warning from David Laborde at the Food and Agricultural Organization. He says, if we have rising demand because biofuels start to consume more and lower supply because we have less input, food prices will go up. He literally calls it the perfect storm. And we have to recognize that this is not some hypothetical scenario for the future. This is undeniable arithmetic already in motion. Fertilizer is surging, oil is high, plants are maxed out, the storm is already here.
Moving on to Section 4, Global Crop Diversion, because this goes way beyond just U.S. corn. And this brilliantly illustrates how this exact same economic incentive is aggressively pulling entirely different staple crops into the fuel chain worldwide. Look at Brazil. As oil rises, mills divert sugarcane to ethanol instead of sugar exports. Since Brazil supplies 40% of traded sugar, global prices surge, hitting vulnerable populations in Africa and South Asia. Over in Indonesia, the B35 mandate pulls palm oil into biodiesel, taking it right out of cooking oil markets in India and China where it's a vital staple. In the US and Brazil, soybean oil is being pulled into renewable diesel. In Europe, it's rapeseed oil going to biodiesel. Everywhere you look, calories meant for humans are being diverted into engines.
All right, let's get into Section 5, the calorie arithmetic. This is where we look at the raw, undeniable numbers.
We really need to translate these abstract global tonnages into visceral human consequences. So let's just look at the raw numbers. 140 million.
That is the staggering number of tons of U.S. corn diverted specifically to ethanol every single year. Let me repeat that. 140 million tons of raw agricultural output pulled straight out of the food system.
And to put that into perspective, here is the raw impact of that single metric. 400 to 500 million. If those 140 million tons of diverted U.S. corn were actually used as food or feed, this is the exact number of people who could be fed for an entire year at subsistence levels. Up to 500 million people's worth of calories, literally burning in gas tanks.
When we zoom out to the global level, right now, about 10% of all global agricultural calories are converted to fuel. But remember that $108 barrel of oil? At those prices, the margins are so irresistible that production is projected to expand, which could quickly push this figure up to 12 to 15% of all global calories going into fuel instead of food.
To truly grasp the gravity of this, contrast those diverted calories with this number right here, 783 million. According to the World Food Program, that's how many people currently face chronic hunger worldwide. The global economic system right now rewards converting enough food to feed the hungry into fuel for the comfortable. It's just raw, undeniable arithmetic, and the math is frankly obscene.
So why not just stop it? That brings us to Section 6, the policy dilemma of fixed mandates.
We have to look impartially at the political realities, keeping this massive arbitrage running unchecked. A huge piece of the puzzle is the Renewable Fuel Standard, or RFS. This is a U.S. policy mandate that legally requires about 15 billion gallons of corn ethanol to be blended into the fuel supply every year. Now, this was designed for energy security and to boost rural economies back in an era when food was abundant. But today, food and oil are both constrained. Yet this rigid policy forces 5 to 6 billion bushels of corn into fuel every year, no matter what's happening with global food supply.
This creates an absolutely agonizing political tightrope. It essentially pits rural economies and ethanol jobs directly against global food security. Modifying the RFS would redirect corn toward food, sure, but it would deeply hurt the ethanol industry, which supports tens of thousands of jobs and generates billions for rural economies. For any U.S. administration, states in the Corn Belt, like Iowa and Nebraska, are absolutely critical for electoral math. It's a very real, very difficult choice between domestic political constituencies and global food availability.
And we could see this exact political paradox playing out recently. During the Trump administration, the government clearly recognized the fertilizer crisis. They suspended the Jones Act for fertilizer transport and lifted sanctions on Belarusian potash to ease supply constraints. But despite those emergency measures, they left the biofuel mandate, the RFS, completely untouched. Political inertia and heavy industry lobbying kept those mandates running at full speed.
So the crucial point is this. We are watching the intersection of rising fuel demand and shrinking food supply forming in real time. The arithmetic doesn't care about the politics, which leaves us with a profound question. Should biofuel mandates be suspended during a global food security emergency? And would altering them even make a difference at this stage? Think about that, let us know your thoughts in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed for our next explainer, where we'll unpack the looming catastrophe of the three-crop calendar. We'll see you there.